Hello and welcome to Divinatory Tarot. My name is Ewan and today we are looking at the Five of Swords in the Thoth deck. Now this is carrying on from the previous swords videos I've done and I highly recommend looking at those. And I also recommend looking at the other playlists I've done for the Minor Arcana, in particular the Suit of Wands, for in that playlist I go through the meaning behind the numbers in much more detail, and those meanings carry across into each suit. Now, if you just want to know the Divinatory Interpretations of this card, I have put a timestamp below in the description for you, but I highly recommend watching this video at least once through, as it will give you much more nuance and understanding to your divination, and not just the textbook meanings. So without further ado, we will look at the Five of Swords. So in this picture we see these five swords with differing hilts, pointing towards a seemingly empty centre. And these form the inverted pentagram, which is made up of pink rose petals, which are in fact the white rose from the previous card stained with blood. And we see now as well, not only are the swords notched and rusted, but we see the pinwheels have virtually all dissipated from the previous cards, apart from a few which form the rather dubious symbol of the swastika. And here in the darkness, which we can barely see, is the sigil of Venus, and down here in the light we can barely see the sigil of Aquarius. So the Five of Swords is the inevitable outcome of a manufactured peace, and that is of course defeat. Being Geburah, the fifth Sephiroth in the Suit of Swords, it is destructive thinking in every aspect of that term, whether it be for good or for ill. It is the question of whether stability and security are necessarily the avenues towards liberation, or are the jailers that keep us locked inside our own instability and insecurities. Sometimes we need to be told to let go and get our proverbial excrement together. There is nothing to lose, because in reality we have gained nothing from our so-called stability in subjective opinions and comforts. Now we must face the opinions and dynamics of others, and if we have too much conviction in our own, then we are both limiting ourselves and our access to experiences and lessons that may in fact return us back to a more objective reality. However, it goes without saying that such a course of action is not easy, and certainly wrought with pain and suffering. How and why would we destroy everything we have built in our concept of self? Why would we trade familiar inner comfort for alien external conflict? So, like the conflicting opinions present in this card, the answers to these questions are not straightforward at all. The key to traversing this battlefield of egos is to acknowledge that some of what we hold true may be true, yet also wary of the compromise yet at the same time, we can also be said that for what others hold true. However, we must be wary of the compromise in the previous card, whereby we agree to disagree, and subject everything to the lonely torment and hypocrisy of universal subjectivity as an objective truth. The Five of Swords encourages us to go further than this, even if it runs the risk of facing and even creating some disastrous ideas on the way, and we'll see the results of this in the Six of Swords. The polarities of dignity in the Five of Swords shift between creating argument and conflict in an attempt to return back to the objective truth in the face of stagnant hypocrisy. And this is when the card is well dignified, of course. Or conversely, arguing against something for the argument's own sake and gaining a sadistic sense of enjoyment from the power of disruption and insult. And this is very much the ill-dignified aspect of this card. Now, in its most ill-dignified state, the Five of Swords is humiliating and shaming others so that we can prevent them from adding further humiliation and shame to our own insecurities. So now we're going to look at the symbolism of this card. Sorry, I stumbled over my words quite a bit there. It's very apt for the Five of Swords, so I thought I'd keep that in there rather than changing the video. So when we look at the Five of Swords, we see that it is one of the most difficult cards of the tarot, or should I say one of the more difficult cards of the tarot. And we can see this in the colour palette, I think, of this card. It's very dark and brooding. Venus and Aquarius are usually pacifying influences, yet here in Geberah, their peaceful ideas have been shattered. They simply cannot contend with the will of change inherent in this Sephiro. Furthermore, the card gives us a glimpse of Aquarius' shadow. Now, Aquarius can be abrasive for its own sake at times, questioning the status quo because it can and not always because it should. Furthermore, Aquarius is somewhat of a paradox. In one respect, it is forward-thinking, rational, and inquisitive, but at the same time it is a fixed sign, so it can be obstinate, stubborn, and idealistic. And of course, being a fixed air sign is itself a contradiction. An ill-dignified Aquarius accepts all opinions, but will oppose any who would question their own. Furthermore, a shadow Aquarius can be cold and calculating when devoid of inspiration or a community to aid. Thus, an isolated Aquarius can be the fifth sword that swoops in to disrupt any stable community that it feels rejected from and is thus lacking. And we see this play out quite a lot these days in the age of Aquarius, especially in this isolated period of time that we live in today. Now, the rose of the previous cards, as already mentioned, has now completely been torn apart. And this rose did represent purity and peace. And now it's we see that the petals are scattered into the shape of an inverted pentagram. This symbol is often a malefic one, as we've seen in the Five of Wands and the Five of Cups. And here in Yetzirah, the realm of thought, it is in its most sinister aspect. This is not only venerating matter over spirit, as is the symbolism behind the inverted pentagram, but also that the thoughts that seem to control matter are better than it. It is a statement that thinking is the greatest of all virtues, even if it is without rationale or virtue itself. From such a belief we see the birth of betrayal, persecution, atrocity, Holocaust, and annihilation. And we will see these play out in the 7, 8, 9, and 10 of Swords. So really the beginning of the end has already happened, and I suppose the beginning of the end is the Five of Swords. Here we see that any thought goes, and in their contagious character, anything can be thought. So this is very much a Jurassic Park kind of card. Just because you could doesn't mean you should. But very much the Five of Swords is I can, so I will. And we see that this taint is reflected in the torn and shredded pinwheels, some of which resemble the Vedic symbol of the swastika, which was of course perverted by the Nazi regime in the 1930s and the 1940s. Now, when we consider that Lady Harris, the artist behind these cards, was painting them during World War II, and she was indeed living through the London Blitz at the time of painting this card, we do of course wonder whether she may have placed the swastika here not only for its esoteric meaning but also for its ill-dignified historical meaning in the 20th century. Now, when we look at the swords, they seem to be quite different from the previous swords we've seen in the suit. The notched central sword shows that clarity has now become lost, and the upturned crown of Kether on its hilt is a symbol of that desecration of spirit, as well as objectivity. Now, when we look at the curved sword's hilts, all reveal ill-dignified aspects of this card. So if we look very carefully, we have a red handkerchief on this one. And this represents blood on the white of peace. And we also see a fish on this one. And this is a symbol of being lost in one's own realm of beliefs. And then we see a ram's horn on this one over here. This represents being stuck and butting heads in conflict. And finally we see the snake on the hilt of this far one over here. And this is a symbol of renewal, but also conversely can represent the restrictive and poisonous nature of the ego if it cannot renew itself. So let's look at the divinatory interpretations of this card. So the Five of Swords is conflict for its own sake, or overturning a false sense of insecurity, or should I say security, depending on its dignity, of course. When well dignified, the card can represent a willingness to understand conflicting opinions and their roots, cleverness, wit, and correlating similarities within differences. So it's not all bad. However, when ill-dignified, which it tends to be quite often, the card represents humiliation, trouble, argument, loss, malice, slander, spite, cruelty, conflict, jealousy, and manipulation. Now, I would say that the key word here is malice, which in every way it turns will inevitably be met with its own defeat. So whilst the card itself is a very malefic card, the very nature of malice means that one day it will be defeating itself. So in that respect we can put a positive spin on this most difficult of cards in the suit of swords. So that has been the Five of Swords. It's quite a complicated card. I did stumble over my words, so I do apologise. But this is of course very fitting for such a card. So if you enjoyed what you saw here today, please do put a like on the video, as it really does help the channel and the video and spread these videos out to a wider audience. And if you would like to see more videos like this, as well as tarot tutorials and of course tarot readings, then do hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. So that is all for today, and thank you very much for watching the video again, and may peace be with you wherever you are. Goodbye.